Good night. Good night to our viewers. Good night to our guests tonight. And let me first give credit to the Globespan team, Nohar Singh, Devin Bissoon, and Kumar, and all the other people who are working hard behind the scenes to make tonight possible. Let me also extend an invitation to our viewers and to advertisers and sponsors. Please feel very welcome to sponsor, to come on our show in any which way you can. Viewers, brothers and sisters, Guyanese at home and abroad, good night. Sugar has been so much part of our history that its effect will last another few generations, much beyond the politics of the current day politicians. Much has been said about sugar, its pros and cons, its obvious contribution to the economy, and its obvious pull from the economy. Throughout our history, as an independent nation, sugar was a major source of foreign exchange. In fact, it was on the back of the sugar workers that numerous other entities were built and maintained nationally. One only needs to examine the historical records, the movement of national funds, the source of funds for many of the national projects, the national expenditures over the past 50 years to realize how much sugar has sweetened this economy and held us afloat through dictatorships and political backwardness. Over the decades, we have been told repeatedly of the cost of production versus the income. Almost every one of us, each of us, would have been told over and over that sugar costs much more than it could earn. And these were in straight dollars and cents terms. The truth is that the politicians have played sugar to its death almost. In their numbers game, the economics of the industry was purposely left aside, cast aside, and the cost per pound became the focus. In other words, from 1960s, 1970s, 80s, and 90s, the sheer value of Gaisuku in its holistic consonance was ignored. For example, Gaisuku's forex was far beyond comparison of many nations. And yes, the politicians have played their many games while the industry continued to struggle along. From the 1970s and 80s, when political appointments were done that ensured square pegs were honored and given high seats, and in the process, the real workers, the real managers, those who gave their sweat, blood, and tears to the industry, they fled. And even in the past couple of decades, the rut continued as families and friends were given positions above the qualified and the deserving. And some members of government saw the industry's assets as maybe their personal playthings. And then came 2015, after which everything was done to ensure that the death blow was dealt to the giant of an industry, to ensure that it became so crippled as to render it as dying. Grand schemes were made up, even though their own advisors and their own inquiry advised against closing of the industry. The current government dealt that death blow. So what is the status of Gaisuku? What about the workers and the stakeholders? Well, one of the long-standing partners to the workers has been the trade union. I remember as a former general secretary of NASI, our fight for certain rights was a righteous fight at the estates. The unions have always been seen as championing the rights of workers, and GAU has, through its history, stood its course in terms of representing the workers. The sugar union is, of course, reeling from the blow dealt to Gaisuku, mainly from the perspective of the general decline in work conditions and the increasing lack of management accountability. With me tonight, as we talk about sugar, are two of the executives from GAU, Mr. Seepaul Narine, the General Secretary of GAU, and Mr. Aslim Singh, the Assistant General Secretary of GAU. Gentlemen, welcome to this Globespan platform.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and a pleasant good night to our viewers.
Thank you. And as we get on with our program, I must start by making the statement that, Gaisuku has one third. Currently, Gaisuku has probably less than, but on an average, one third of its employees compared to a few years ago. So two-thirds of the people have been let go. So let us start the ball rolling. And if you could educate the viewers, those who are, overseas and across this country that might not have had their fingers on the pulse, how many of the sugar estates would have been closed within the recent years? And how many workers would have been directly impacted by these closures?
Okay, good night once more. Since there had been a change in government, APNU AFC, they closed Wales in 2016. Then at the end of 2017, they closed Skeldon, Rose Hall, and Enmore Estates. They put 7,500 employees out of jobs. And remaining, you have three estates. You have Albion, you have Blemont, and you have West Demerara, which is Iflat Estate. So you now currently have in the three estates approximately 8,000 workers. So if you would have looked a few years prior, when the industry had been nationalized, you had close to 24,000 employees. Over a period, because of mechanization and other things, the workforce dropped. So you had about 16,000. And bear in mind, you don't have all the employees who are permanent employees. Some of them, they are casuals. They work just during the in-crop period, and they are not given work in the out-of-crop period unless they qualify 3 crops. So you have the seasonal nature of the industry and people working on and off. Like I said, in 1990, when you had a problem in the industry also where people were not going to work because of the low level of wages. And under President Hoyt, he had said people were turning lawyers and doctors and professionals. But immediately as Booker Tate came in, and they gave some huge increases in an 18 months period, you had workers coming back to the industry and the industry rebouncing back. So I said this because there is a lot of talk of Gaisuku not being able to have the requisite workforce, Gaisuku not being able to reach its production level, and the different things that you will hear. But like I said, at the moment, you have about 8,000 employees, and you had 4 estates closed under the APNU AFC government. And this is against their own commission of inquiry.
Correct.
And Aslim will talk a little bit about that because he participated as a member of that committee representing us, DAO. That commission of inquiry said that there should be no closure of any estates. And, the government spent a lot of money on that commission of inquiry, close to $100 million they spent. And they went against the recommendations and the findings of their own commission of inquiry. So clearly, one can see from their attitude that they don't have sugar at heart, despite all the talks. I heard recently Vice President Kemraj Ramjatan said that, you have to take people away from hard work. And meaning that you have to take people away from the sugar industry. I don't know if the man was high when he said that. But sugar has played its role in Guyana and continues to play that role. The entire coast had been drained by the canals of the sugar estate. You had medical facilities being provided to the employees of the estates. And there had been other benefits. which if the state had to pay, it would have been an enormous cost on them.
So let's put a pin on that discussion, because that is extremely important. A lot of times people ignore some of these facts because it is not being relayed to the public. And what you have said actually is the truth. That is, throughout its independent history, Gaisuku, while we see it as the sugar producer that is producing at whatever high cost, but as you rightly point out, it has maintained the drainage of the entire coastlands, Berbice, West Demerara, and it has contributed to more or less designed cultivation. I think in Berbice, if you look at the proximity of the Skellen cultivation, the Albion cultivation, the Rosal, to the rice producers, it also aided rice production in terms of ensuring that excess water was being removed from the interior and so forth, so that the rice farmers too benefited in one way or another. So the overall holistic value of Gaisuku cannot be seen, this is what you're saying there, in just dollars and cents.
Absolutely so. And, one has to remember the days of the sugar levy. In 1974, when the levy was introduced, and immediately after, it accounted for about 25% of the budget. And don't forget, it was sugar lands that had been released for the housing of so many people in this country through the Sugar Industry Labor Welfare Fund. And apart from that, land that had been released by Gaisuku itself for the purpose of housing. If you look at Eccles, which is one of the, I just call Eccles, probably because I'm living there. But if you look at Eccles, that had been cane lands. You look at some other places that land had been Diamond, and you have places like Luziknan, you have along the coast, land had been released from Gaisuku for the purpose of housing and development.
But also, what I think viewers might be interested in being reminded of is that there was something called the Sugar Welfare Fund, right?
That's the Sugar Industry Labor Welfare Fund.
That maintained a lot of the potable water wells and a lot of the housing infrastructure and so forth in various communities.
Yes, and then it also helped to resettle. It was the Sugar Industry Labor Welfare Fund that scheme helped to resettle people from the lodges under Dr. Jagan.
Right.
So, one cannot forget the role that sugar has played in this country and continues to play in terms of the foreign exchange, in terms of the number of people it has employed, its contribution to the NIS. Since those 7,500 people had been put on the breadline, they're not paying NIS.
Correct.
And the NIS is now in trouble because they are now saying that, the contributions are not enough to pay the pensioners and to carry its day-to-day activities. In fact, recently, the actuaries said that for the NIS to survive, the contributions have to go up significantly. And of course, this is because of the number of contributors that fell off the scheme by just knocking sugar.
And so let's talk a little bit about the two things. One is, Mr. Singh, I'm going to ask you to probably come in here. Let's talk about the plight of the sugar workers, because as you know, we have been in dialogue, myself, Globespan team, and you. We have been in dialogue trying to see how we can get a couple of those sugar workers on this program to talk about what's happening with their lives. Tell us about the plight of the people in Wales, the people in Kanji. I mean, I myself have gone around these areas, and people are in some real dire problems. So let's talk about that, and then I want to address a question asked by Mr. Tularam about the funding, the EU funding. If Gau would have had an idea what might have transpired with the funding that would have come from the EU. But Aslim, if you don't mind, let's talk about the sugar workers and the plight, the areas that were closed.
All right, Joe. Thanks first for having us. Good night to you and your viewers. Um, like you said, we've been in dialogue for some weeks now about having the sugar workers. That offer still stands whenever we can have it materializing. But like Seepaul was saying, the situation, and you probably know this too, in the sugar community, the way these estates once existed, they're basically the only economic endeavor there, or the major economic activity. So when you take away that activity, there's nothing there for these people. In fact, just last week, Gao facilitated a press conference with some of these sugar workers, and many have shared that their situation has not really improved. Many of them have remained on the breadline, surviving with odd jobs. When they go to work today, they don't know whether they can work tomorrow. Many of them are having difficulties to send their children to school. I know of one instance where a comrade from Skeldon, his wife was ill. He got the severance pay. He By that time the illness was so the costs now of medicine and medical care again it's prohibitive. So, utilizes severance to try to save his wife's life. Unfortunately, he wasn't successful. But because of the situation there at Skeldon, unable to get a job, his child who was about to write CXC had to come out of school because he simply couldn't have afforded it. There's another situation of a girl at Wales, where the community of workers there, she had a single mother, and her mother I think was bedridden, and she couldn't have supported her. So the community there supported the child to go to school. Obviously now the estate closed. Many people are unable to support themselves, much as to support another. This child has had to leave school. So
Right.
it's a disheartening and almost disturbing situation, and many of the workers continue to lament that even opportunities spoken about for land or even trading remains absent. But just to add a point to which Narine was making just now about the contributions of the industry, you made the point, it's not really seen, but they're the tangible expressions. In economics, there's a differentiation between financial profit and economic profit. Financial, which deals the black and white dollars and cents, but economic profit talks about opportunity costs. And we're seeing the ramifications of the economic profit now lost with the closure of these estates. The amount of money, in fact, in 2019, the government approached the parliament, no, 2018, in spite of an allocation to India, the government has approached the parliament twice for supplementary appropriations to take care of drainage for sugar, for instance. And there's so many other things which are there no longer, are just falling down. So it's a sad situation, like I said. It's not really improving. It's actually getting worse by the day. And there's seemingly at this point, there's no light at the end of the tunnel.
Correct. Well, one of the, I think,
there's
sure.
one point I want to add. And apart from the closure and putting people on the breadline and taking away their dreams, people were working, generations have worked and built in the sugar industry. And those who were there, they were building and they were dreaming about a future for their children. But what happened? The APU AFC government snatched that dream from them. People couldn't send their kids to school. They lost everything that they had. And, that is for those who were put on the breadline. But the APU AFC government did not give an increase in wages and salaries since it was in office. From 2015, there has not been a cent increase, despite their campaign that they would have given 20% every year, not a blind cent. So apart from those who they put on the breadline by snuffing out their jobs and their dreams, they also continue to suffer those who are there by not giving them an increase. So in 2020, people are living on 2014 wages and salaries.
So there are a number of rippling effects here. One is, of course, NIS is reeling. So that Social Security being aside from everything else, there would definitely be a rundown of drainage and irrigation and all these things because the estates are now closed. So that will now be a direct dip into the national treasury, because whereas Gaisuku used to maintain all of this. So to the viewers out there, when you would hear that, okay, Gaisuku is pulling X amount of billions from the national treasury every year, it is not just to run Gaisuku, but it's to keep the country going. It's to keep drainage and irrigation going, keep education, keep healthcare, keep a lot of things going. So the other thing that I think is extremely important to mention here is the contribution of Gaisuku is not alone for sugar, but that influx of foreign exchange was extremely important to Guyana. A lot of people may not know or may not remember that in the 1980s, 1970s, there was a foreign exchange restriction in this country. It was Gaisuku that used to keep us afloat. However, 1960s, Gaisuku used to produce 300,000 tons of sugar. Now it's under 100,000 tons. So the decline has been gradual, but it has been there. Do you think, Mr. GS, that this outcome could have been predictable?
It could have been avoided.
Okay.
What is the problem? It appears as if Gaisuku lacks the ability to manage the industry effectively. And under this government, there has been many miscarriages. You had 4 estates close, and you had 350 almost senior staff at the Gaisuku level. The estates are closed, and you have 540 almost. And this is at the head office level.
Mm-hmm.
So you have lower production, you have less estates, but you have more people at your head office. And you have some people at the head office, I am told, that some of them in factory operations can't even climb the steps of the factory. And because of their age and their inability. So, you have a system that is operating at the industry level that is not going to allow for the estates to become profitable. But one of the important things, yes. I said that it could have been avoided. Because we all saw that the price was going to be cut. And under the PPP, I must give them credit for the Skeldon project, because they embarked on the Skeldon project, and that project, which was approved by the World Bank and different financial institutions, had hoped to bring down production to 8 cents per pound. And then it had also gone into cogeneration. The last number I saw, they had been making almost $9 billion from the cogeneration. So the direction of the industry was not one that it was sugar alone. And we have said that over and over. We said that to the government when we met with them. And we said that you need to diversify from within, from the products of sugar, not to go and, plant rice like we did at Wales recently. And, I don't know if Paddy Bog or whatever eat out the rice. And different things, they said they will have fish and,
but stick a pin there. Let's just remind the viewers too and ourselves in the process. 1980s, this would have been under the Burnham government. Correct me if I'm wrong. Gaisuku then went on a path of diversification that literally stole a lot, or diverted, probably is a better word, a lot of the sugar money into diversified projects that failed, that was doomed to fail, because when they started rice, they put their own people to run rice, people who knew nothing about rice, like the Minister of Agriculture. But diversification failed then, and it was doomed to fail because of political interference. And this government, same government probably, then restarted diversification in 2018, 2019, and that has failed too. So have they done anything new?
They were doing cassava. They buy cassava mill. They had the Warner oil plant. they had legumes, and they had fish, and all those things failed. We said to them that, look, um, you didn't manage, and you didn't manage well. And, when you started back at Wales, they said that Wales would have been the launching pad, that they would have gone into rice, and they would have gone into livestock, and, so many things that they would have gone into at Wales. The only thing they went into is rice, and they failed miserably. It cost Gaisuku money. And we said to them that, look, you have to look at having enhanced revenue from your byproducts. You have to look at molasses, you have to look at the distillery, you have to look at things like animal feed, the products that you could use, like the bagasse, and you turn it into electricity, cogeneration, and you supply current. These are things that, in a short term, it is easier to diversify there. And I remember some time ago there had been a delegation that went to Cuba and looked at the Cuban industry. And I had been a member of that delegation, and ex-President Daniel Ramotar. And we brought the recommendation to Booker Tate, who was running the industry at that time. And, they just dismiss it, probably because it was Cuba. And, many things that they are doing, sugarcane is growing in this country almost 400 years now. And Gaisuku's management is still tinkering. They are still experimenting,
But something you said, it's worthy of deeper analysis. And we need to be reminded of this. In whatever year it was, you'll remind us, when Booker Tate was invited to come in back into the industry, within a short period, Booker Tate gave 2 or 3 increases to the sugar workers that saw an influx of skilled workers back to the industry. So, in other words, the foreign countries saw the importance and saw the contribution of Gaisuku, but since then it has been running again, isn't it?
Yes, it was 1990, and it was October that Booker Tate came in. And at that time, you had a huge devaluation under Minister Greenidge. The US dollar went from 10 to 1 to 35 to 1, then to 120, thereabouts. And because of the devaluation, Gaisuku found itself with tons of money. And they agreed to have Gaisuku standing by itself, away from the public sector. So Booker Tate when they came in, they gave 50% increase, then they give 75% increase, then 50% increase, and then another 35% increase in 18 months. Every 6 months there had been an increase. And, like I said before, President Hoyt was saying that people were not working in the industries because sugar workers' children were becoming doctors and lawyers and professionals. But here, after the increases, you see people return back to the industry, and the industry turned around within a short period. From 129,000 tons of sugar, 129,920 to be exact. In 2 years' time, it reached almost 240, which was a significant movement in a short time. And here again, we are seeing this decline rapidly because of the level of wages and salaries once more. And like I said before, this government has not granted an increase to the sugar workers since it got into government.
And also one very interesting thing you mentioned that we need to probably have a relook at. The investment into the new plant at Skeldon was, I know of this because I was the financial analyst then, and I remember that the investment there was basically a World Bank initiative, was backed by international agencies because they saw that if managed properly, sugar has a definite future. Now, one of the things I noticed that our brother Singh is on, and says, I'm going to ask you a question. I don't know if you want to comment now, but I would like yourself and Joel Bagwandin's contribution on this point. Now, if, as the General Secretary and Assistant General Secretary is saying, 3 estates currently operate, 3, the savings that the government is therefore getting, the opportunity savings that it should be getting after saving from that kind of bailout that you would have budgeted for in an annual basis, where are those funds? What's happening to those funds? Is it still in the national budget and is it going somewhere else? But that's another discussion we can have. Let us come to address something that one of the viewers had asked. What happened to the EU funds? Because the EU had given some subsidies. Let's take a little commercial break, and when we come back, GS, I'm going to direct that question to you with regards to the EU funds. Devin, over to you.
Looking for an embroidery service or advertising services? Look no further than Inspire Incorporated. Get your very own personalized items that include rubber stamps, ID cards, mousepads, diaries, polos, office wear, and so much more. Create your own logo or messages on any substract. It's very quick and efficient. Call Inspire Incorporated today at 222-2042 or visit at 62 Area Q, Turkine, Guyana.
Thank you, and we're back. So, Mr. General Secretary, indeed, there was some subvention, there was some allowance given by the EU to Guyana for the sugar industry to allow it to buffer that price decline. What, in Gau's experience, would have transpired with that funding?
Okay, the funding that was given by the EU was not for sugar. The funding was earned from the agriculture sector, and they had certain indicators that had to be reached. And one important component had been sugar. But the funding from the EU went towards budgetary support. And the government of the day used that money to benefit the entire Guyana. And I know also that out of the EU funding, they had built the packaging plant at Enmore, and they had improved on the Enmore factory. And then they had also done some mechanization work in the fields to have the land prepare for mechanical planting and harvesting. And then remember the Skeldon project. Some people say 200 million. Well, let's use that number, US dollars. The Skeldon project had been funded by the national budget. So one can safely argue that even though the money came as budgetary support, a lot of it went back into sugar. And if we were to look at what went into Skeldon and the other estates, one would be convinced that, well, the numbers will show that they spent more in the industry than what they received as budgetary support. But all in all, that money that came as budgetary support helped to build the entire Guyana. It helped to build the education system, the health system, housing, and all social amenities that went along with budgetary support.
Okay.
In fact, this government, the APNU AFC government, when they came into office, they also enjoyed the last payment. I think it was
6.6 million.
Yeah, Aslim remember the number.
6.6 billion.
Right. So, you know, the money didn't came directly for sugar, just to repeat that.
But you let me make a point in this.
Yes,
EU.
sure. And Mr. Singh, as you're going to talk about the EU thing, also address this question for me. The packaging plant, what's the current status of it?
Okay, well, like Narine said, the EU monies came to the consolidated fund as what you call budgetary support. That's the arrangement we had with the EU. Apart from the monies which was spent in other sectors, health, housing, and whatnot, there were specific initiatives which the government, Gaisuku, and the EU um, agreed to, what you call indicators. So a lot of money was spent, especially and more, apart from the packaging plant, to improve the ability to have more mechanization done there. In fact, a lot of work, in fact, probably most of it, more lands have already been converted from mechanized harvesting, recognizing as you go along the problem with labor. So a lot of work, and in all the essays, a lot of replanting was done. That is why by 2015, you had sugar production reaching 231,000 tons. Just a point, don't you mentioned in 1960s, industry was producing 300,000 tons, but in between 2002 and 2004, the industry also produced an average of 320,000 tons per annum. So while yes, it became down to 129,000 in 1990. In just about 12 years later, you were back up to your 1960 production level. So there's a possibility of recovery once it's proper management and of course a motivated workforce.
Correct.
Um, More specifically to your question, the packaging plant, it's just lying there idle. I know Gaisuku was using it a bit in 2018 and sometime last year to transfer sugar from Blairmont to be packaged because the Blairmont packaging plant hadn't the capacity to package enough sugar. But generally, it's lying idle there. In fact, GAWA's recently learned, in fact, Gaisuku is advancing plans to dismantle the plant and to take it to Albion, where they hope to construct a plantation-wide sugar plant and to do packaging there as well. But generally, it's lying idle there. I don't know what's the state of the equipment. I doubt they're being maintained, and so it's just there. The plans to have the estate sold is now being shelved. In fact, apparently shelved. It seems Mr. Earl John last week had a letter in the paper inquiring what this SPU of NISIL is doing and have they been able to fulfill their mandate.
Correct. And the new Skellen factory.
Just like the Enmore plant, it's with the exception of the cogeneration plant, I don't think anything has been done there. But like Narine said, I think Skellen, in my own view, was a brave investment. Like you said, it was endorsed by the major players at that time.
Right.
So it represented a boldness by the powers that be then to recognize the value of the sugar industry and recognizing the contribution it could make and even expanding that contribution. So while it did have its setbacks, and we of GAU believe it still can overcome those difficulties, it recognized it was the first step in the new journey where sugar should be. And as Narine said, I served in the Commission of Inquiry, and one of the foremost recommendations of the Commission of Inquiry was to go into cogeneration. They felt that this was the area where the industry could have realized its greatest value.
Correct.
In 2016, when Skellen was producing at 1/3 of its capacity, that cogeneration plant raked in $9 billion. Incidentally, that year, the government provided $11 billion in subsidies. So in other words, had Gaisuku had control of that plant, it really would have required a subsidy of about $2 billion.
Right.
So, and that's just one plant. There is a potential to do that several other estates.
Very good point. And just for clarity too, the cogeneration plant was meant to produce electricity as a byproduct.
Right.
Yeah, the waste.
It's an add-on. It's using the waste of the factory
Correct.
to generate value.
So General Secretary, what has gone so wrong? One, politics, but tell us about the rest. What has gone so wrong?
Mismanagement. One word. Mismanagement. You know, when that plant was ready to operate, the cultivation was not ready. And then when you had the kilns, at one point, the plant had deficiencies. You know, one of the difficulty you had was that Booker Tate is a major player that has to be blamed in this scenario because they were the managers of the industry and they were the contractors for Skeldon for its expansion and for the factory. And, you know, local managers had no say. You know, I remember I remember Vishnu Pandey at one time, who had been manager of the estate. And he when he made some inquiries about the cultivation expansion, he was told this is not your job, this is not your business. I remember Victorine Corbett, who had been responsible for the expansion of the cultivation. He was supervising the work as an AFM. He also had limited um, authority. He
Mm-hmm.
was told to do it in this way, and it ended up with a drainage problem because while they were expanding the cultivation, they were not expanding the drainage system.
Correct.
And eventually you had floods on the old estate part, and then you had problems. I remember one time myself and Jairam Pitam, who had been the industrial relations director, out of complaints we had by workers, we visited Skeldon. And when we reported back to Gaisuku's board, they called Pitam and myself alarmists.
Mm-hmm.
And because, they were covering for their own cronies
But
who were
but
mismanaging.
but if you were to say it's mismanagement and the top managers are politically appointed, aren't they?
I don't think so. And well, under AFC, that might be so, and APNU.
But the head of the board has
Because
always been politically appointed.
you made the point earlier in your opening statement when you said many people who are skilled and who has the knowledge, they are fleeing this country because they don't see a future in Gaisuku.
Correct.
And you have some good managers, you
Mm-hmm.
have some who are knowledgeable, but are they given the authority to manage and manage efficiently?
Correct.
And there is neglect. Your yields are coming down.
Mm-hmm.
Your quality of canes are getting bad. Your TCTS, the amount of canes you are using to make a ton of sugar is going up.
Right. But
And
yes, that has been one of the historic cries of the industry, hasn't it? That the yields was getting worse and worse. But just before you answer that, I noted one of our viewers, Kevindra Tolaram, has asked a question: a COI was done in the industry, and whether any of the recommendations pointed to closure. To Mr. Tolaram, I'll say no. In fact, the COI advised against closure. I think both Mr. Singh and Mr. Narine might comment on that. But we're going to share the link with you and with all the viewers where you can go and access the Commission of Inquiry reports, and you can do a checkup at yourself. Aslam, I'm going to come to you with the next question, and GS, you can follow up with this. Norman Aslam is asking a very, very important question, which I've asked myself. And I'll preface it by saying the following. The PPP's current election campaign also pegs reopening of sugar estates. Mr. Aslam is asking a very important question. Is it physically viable to open any of the closed estates due to the lack of maintenance?
I believe it is. I generally believe it is physically viable. It's not going to be an overnight process. It will take some time and it will take some resources, but it is viable. It's possible. We have developed lands which have been virgin before. It's not a new process to Gaisuku or Guyana, so it's not a big challenge, but it requires the wherewithal and the know-how to get the job done. So to Mr. Aslam and to your viewers, I believe that yes, it's not impossible, but it requires that to look at what's going on in these communities now. Is it not an imperative that they be reopened? One young lady who was at the press conference last week said, look, nothing else is there. Reopen the estates. They reached that stage of desperation.
But one could equally argue that the government can find other sources of engaging its populace. In other words, whether it's the construction industry or any other industries
Yeah,
that
but
might start up.
even construction has a period. When you finish building everything, what happens? It's not a sustainable industry that will continue to grow. It may, with oil and gas, be sustainable provide work. But even that, at what levels of pay and what benefits? Many workers I know on the East Coast work with the Chinese road contractors, and you see
But
them lamenting what they get.
let me be devil's advocate here. I have seen the state of the Rose Hall estate. It's 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 almost purposefully demolished. And I repeat that phrase, it's purposefully demolished. You can see what has happened to that factory. I believe it's impossible to reopen it.
I don't share your view, Yoga. I mean, it's not, like I said, it's not an easy job. It's not something that is going to happen, like I said, overnight, but it can happen.
Can we afford it?
Can we not afford it? That should be the question. Can
Very
we
good.
afford to continue to keep these people the way they are, pauperized and impoverished? They're literally staying at poverty at their doorsteps. If not, they're probably impoverished already.
But let us dissect that. Let us just let us dissect that. It's something you want to happen. Let us take away the want. Let us take away the social aspect of it, and let us look at, is it really financially feasible and viable?
Joe,
Well,
just to interject, just a second.
We support,
Just a
we
second.
at Daru, we support fully the reopening of the estates. And we believe that it is the right way to go. And it is not impossible. It is more probable than improbable. You know, I work in the estates. I used to be working in the cultivation, planting cane, doing different work. I work in the factory. And, you know, it would take about 2 years. It would take about 2 years to bring back all those estates. And you already have the land, you already have the layout. What you need to do is some cleanup and replanting. And, you know, if you look at Enmore is the fastest one that could turn around because it is already mechanically friendly. And you also have a new plant there at Enmore. That plant was refurbished up to recent, and you have the facility to produce dry sugar. Dry sugar could be value-added sugar. So one has to have the will politically. And reopening the estates must not be seen as a sugar industry. It has to be seen as a sugar cane industry, meaning that you will do things like you will do artificial fertilizers, you will do cogeneration, you will do alcohol.
Correct.
To begin with. You know, one of the amazing things, we import a lot of alcohol that is being used in the medical system, in the barber shops, in the beauty salon, and all kind of places. And these are low quality alcohol. You don't have to make alcohol to compete with any existing company to drink.
Mm-hmm.
You need alcohol for the medical system. You need alcohol for different things, you know.
Correct. But I can add this to you. I can add this to you. Aslim, take it after this. I can add this to you that I am aware of studies being done, and again, it was an internationally backed venture about 10 years ago to convert the Wales Iflot estates into ethanol production. So there was a plan, a viable plan to continue using the industries. Over to you, Aslim.
That is when Booker T decided to write the will for Iflot Estate, and they run it down because at that time they were looking to buy small estates to cultivate cane and to make ethanol, and Iflot Estate had sued that. So what they were doing in the management of Booker T, they were running that estate down.
Correct.
Until there was a study, and the study proved exactly that the estate was deliberately mismanaged and neglected. Maybe
but the point remains that even though they ran it down for a particular purpose because they wanted to invest in that stream, but the viability of the lands and the viability of the industry and so forth continue to remain very credible.
Well, that's the point I was making.
Yes.
That they were running it down with the intent of buying it to go into ethanol. But it is ideally a good estate to go into ethanol. It has the right size of cultivation, it has a suitable mill, and everything else that one would like to have at a cultivation that could give you ethanol.
Correct, correct.
You're just
Aslim, sorry, you were going to make a point on the
2 points. Ethanol, the Commission of Inquiry considered it as an ID or as a venture, but it was found out to be feasible then, bearing in mind the price of oil. I don't know where oil will go. There are different prognoses you're seeing, but it's not viable at this time. What is viable, however, is that raw alcohol. You have a lot of countries here in the Caribbean who are importing what you call extranuclear alcohol from externally. Even the banks that age rights here for their rums, they have to import alcohol because they don't get molasses. So there's that possibility. But just a little bit more back, you said you asked to examine the reopening of the estates from a dollar and cents perspective. But that is the problem we've been focusing on all the time. We've continued to examine the industry solely from a dollar and cents perspective, ignoring the other factors that are at play, and it seems we continue to make wrong decisions. That's how I see it.
But to counter your point, no one disagrees from an economic and social perspective that you need to look at these things from that perspective. But given that we have gone past the days of social caretaking and social patrimony and government patrimony and so forth, then you would look that you can sustain such industries that is self-sustaining. Government would want to ensure that such projects, any government would want to ensure such projects are there. I think, though, the overall point that we have all made and agreed is that there has been numerous studies done to show that the industry was viable in many ways.
Exactly, Yo. I think we have a unique opportunity in Guyana to be probably the first sugar industry in the world to be self-sustaining. Research has shown every sugar industry in the world gets state support in one way or another. We have a unique and distinct possibility to become self-sustaining once we walk the right path.
Aslim, the other thing that I think a lot of our analysts and protagonists and so forth debate fail to take cognizance of when they make these debates is look at the EU. Billions, literally billions of EU money is given to farmers in the EU to subsidize them.
Beet sugar, exactly.
30 billion is given annually for milk production.
You have the same thing.
Yeah, that's
you have the same thing in the US. You have it in India, Thailand, correct. Even Brazil. Right next door to Brazil, there are certain incentives that encourage production.
Correct. So while we're looking at that 80 billion, as the government would have claimed, that 80 billion figure that they've been touting as a subvention, it's overstated for one. I think it's overstated by 5 or 6 times its value. But two, it's probably a necessary something given the overarching effect that the industry has. And why I'm saying it's overstated, correct me if I'm wrong, why I'm saying it's overstated by a large percentage is because if you take out Gaisuko's work, as you said earlier, Mr. GS, Gaisuko's work on the national drainage and irrigation systems, Gaisuko's work in healthcare, Gaisuko's work in maintaining all the community centers, Gaisuko's work in education, Gaisuko's work in training. When you take out all of that, really, what subvention is there that we're talking about?
There's a new one now, Yog. The cost of the foreign exchange DDL has to find to import molasses.
Very true.
So it adds to that, as well as the opportunity cost of the last foreign exchange.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, Professor Thomas, in his report in the Commission of Inquiry, for those who read, would see that he calculated domestic resource costs. It was taking 93 Guyana dollars to obtain $1 US from sugar when the official exchange rate was at 210 to 1. So according to his calculation, it was continue viable to sustain sugar. In fact, the CDB, in a study did in 2014, the sugar mechanization project, encouraged the government to continue to support sugar, recognizing its basis for employment and foreign exchange earnings, apart from the litany of things you mentioned just now.
Correct. And I think both Kishan Budu and Barry Sanchara commenting very wisely that foreign investors should have been given a better chance to see what could happen to the industry. And Barry is saying that reopening will create jobs and revival of community irrigation, health facilities, and so forth. That is perfect, and it's what we have been talking about. Let's take a quick commercial break, and we'll come back and we'll basically be wrapping up our show tonight.
Ever wanted to see Europe? How about London, Belgium, Amsterdam, Germany, Austria, Italy, Switzerland, and France? This limited time 15-day tour is now available. With hotel accommodations and daily breakfast, this offer is not one to miss. Call Travelspan today at 212-243-0865. With offices in Queens, Brooklyn, Trinidad, and Guyana, Travelspan provides a finer quality in travel.
Thank you, and we're back. Mr. GS and Mr. Assistant GS, it's been a great chat. I think, it's too short of a program to have a meaningful discussion on sugar. But here is the bigger question. If the current political atmosphere prevails, where do we go from here? What's our future? Aslim first, you, and then GS.
If in the current dispensation, I don't see a bright future. Just one of your viewers asked earlier what happened to the $30 billion bond, and that's a big question now. The industry needs money. Gaisuku at the end of last year, earlier this year, issued a statement speaking about the lack of capital investment impeding the quality of its factory performance. Those monies which have been borrowed for the industry, which are accruing interest. In fact, I think you start paying back the principal now on some of those monies, but you're not releasing it to Gaisuku, which really requires the money now to succeed, to turn around. Now, we have had a glimpse of the Gaisuku plan. On paper, it sounds good, but as we said in a statement to the media last week, it's losing relevance by the day as the money seemingly is imprisoned by those who have borrowed it. And the government, which should have addressed this situation, in fact, President Granger, when he visited Albion in June last year, said, committed publicly, in fact, that he would have had this matter addressed soon thereafter. As far as we know, the tussle between NISL and Gaisuku continues, and the sugar workers who remain, as Narine mentioned, are now still earning 2014 wages in this new decade of the 2020s, are caught in the middle. And we can very well find that the situation we lament that prevails at Skeldon, Rosal, East Demerara, and Wales can become even worse and spread to the other estates. And this is what GAO is very fearful of, and GAO has been continuing to make this point regularly, recognizing the writing on the wall. Unless the situation is arrested and the monies are released in a way that ensures that they're spent properly and that we get returns for investment.
Correct. Mr. GS, your point.
I want to put it blunt. If the current political atmosphere continues under this administration, there is no future for sugar. And Aslim have said a lot. Just so they are talking about the development and everything else, but they have the money from the bonds in prison. They have the closed estates that people want to buy, and they're not selling. They're not even making any attempt to have it reopen. One time NISL said on the SPU that they will reopen the estates and then they will prepare them for sale. All of that is just window dressing on top. And the attitude that is being displayed by this government is saying clearly, we don't have any interest in sugar. And even though you have 3 estates, and there's a lot of talk about keeping these 3 estates, action speaks louder than words. Their actions are telling the Guyanese people, we don't want it, we don't care. And therefore, the people of Guyana, if they want to maintain the sugar industry and to protect those estates, it's a challenge. It's something that they have to ensure happens, to, to ensure that there is enough pressure to keep those estates going.
Right.
But if this administration continues with its current attitude to sugar, sugar is dead.
Correct. I agree with you, and I think there's so much we can talk about. I'm sorry that we're out of time because one, we spoke about forex, we spoke about the sheer impact of Gaisuku's earnings on this economy in terms of foreign exchange. We spoke about the impact of exports, us being a net exporter because of sugar. We spoke about the use of the sugar funds. I think Sace mentioned it rightly, over 1.2 billion. Over the last 50 years, billions of dollars have been taken from sugar and being used to revitalize other industries all across this country. When sugar now needs the help to get itself back on its 2 feet, we have literally chopped the 2 feet off. The sad fact is, and I think across this country, I'm going to call on our brothers and sisters. The sad fact is that whether we're looking at Gaisuku with a dispassionate view or not, there are 10,000 workers that have been displaced. Today has nothing to do, and no alternate work is available to all of these people. So we need to think about the future of this country and think about how we can better place people for their own development and future. GS, final comments, 30 seconds.
Well, thanks to our viewers, first of all, and thanks to you for hosting us. It is our view that sugar will continue to play a role in this economy, but sugar has to be protected. Sugar is going through a bad patch, but many years ago it went through that patch and it survived. It has the ability to rebound and become once more sustainable once managed properly. That's the important point, once managed effectively and efficiently.
Thank you. And I must tell you that I've also invited Gaisuku to, at their pleasure, to indicate when they can come on the show to discuss management of the sugar industry. But I'll let the union know when that happens too. Deputy GS, final comments, 30 seconds.
Thanks again for having us. I want to add just one thing to what Narine said. In addition to efficient management, one, it's a motivated workforce, and two, the will. I think what is lacking right now is the will to save sugar. You know, they say where there's a will, there's a way. There's a way. But I think what we're lacking right now is the will to do that. While we've heard all of the nice talk, like Narine said, it's empty. It's just empty and hollow promises. But I certainly believe I took part in the COI's Gahu's rep, and I see there's a future. There's, like you said, several studies have been done over the last 2 decades or so, which have confirmed viability or avenues for viability. So there is a future for sugar. It's made a contribution, and it can continue to make a contribution once it has the right support.
And in closing, let me say this: the entire Caribbean is there as our market. Guyana is the only one of the CARICOM countries of this part of the world here, that has the lands, that has the industry already laid out, that can become the producer, even if it were to supply to the Caribbean countries. That alone will make it worthwhile. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure to talk about sugar tonight. I'm sorry we are out of time, but yes, I think both Kishan Budhu and Gloria Saintu has said, allow investors, allow openness in the industry, allow people to have a look and a see and advise what can happen. To Gau, congratulations on being there for all these years and having the back of the sugar workers, being the ones that they could stand to and brace on, and continue doing the great job you're doing. I know Mr. Chand is also also listening to this program tonight. He's unable to be on it. That is the president, Mr. Komal Chand, and our regards and respect to him. GS, Deputy GS, thank you for being here tonight. To our viewers out there, thank you all for tuning in. On Wednesday, we'll be back with political discussions. Good night, everyone. Have a wonderful night. And let's all know sugar can be revived. Sugar can be saved. Where there is a will, there is a way. Thank you all. Good night, everyone.